Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 38 of the Strokecast. I first met Maggie Whittum a couple of months ago thanks to an episode I did with the folks at The Slow Road to Better. You can go ahead and listen to that episode over at strokecast.com/slowroad. Maggie and I connected to record this episode, and I really enjoyed the chat. Maggie has a nice, deliberate way of speaking, and you can really hear the emotion in her voice as she talks. Like Whitney from last week, Maggie's story is a frightening reminder that even if you do everything right, stroke can happen to anyone at any age. That doesn't mean you should ignore risk factors. Just keep in mind that a healthy lifestyle only reduces the risk of stroke. It doesn't eliminate it entirely, just makes it much less likely that you'll have one. On the other hand, a healthy pre-stroke lifestyle also does help with recovery and helps make rehab a lot easier than it would be otherwise. Maggie was 33 years old when a cavernous angioma failed and she had a hemorrhagic stroke in her brainstem. The bleeding went on for several days before she went to the hospital. At the time, stroke was really the first thing from her mind. She was a healthy, athletic, driven, non-smoking actor in the best physical condition of her life. After spending several years acting, producing, and directing projects around the world, she moved to Washington, D.C. to pursue a Master of Fine Arts program at George Washington University. That all changed when her stroke hit her at the end of her first semester there. Now, Maggie lives in Denver, where she continues to work on her recovery, create art projects to illustrate just what chronic pain is like, and acts on stage with the Family Theater, a company focused on providing opportunities for actors with disabilities. Now, Maggie is taking everything that she's learned from her time as an actor, director, producer, writer, teacher, and stroke survivor to assemble a team and create The Great Now What? A documentary exploring stroke, recovery, the healing power of art, and her journey to claim a powerful new identity. So let's meet Maggie. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for joining me here on Strokecast this week.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, we've heard a little bit about your story and your background. So to start off, could you tell us a little bit of what your life was like before you had your stroke?
Sure. I was 33 years old when I had my stroke, and up until that time, I'd been super active and athletic. I traveled the world a bunch and lived abroad in a bunch of places. I'd gone to college and studied drama, and then been out in the world being a freelance actor, director, and producer, doing a bunch of different sorts of projects. And the lifestyle of a freelance artist being what it is, it doesn't pay much. So you got to have a lot of other jobs. And so I had several other jobs as well to help me pay the bills. That meant my life was super hectic. Sometimes I would work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I was super, super busy. But I loved it. I really thrived on that sort of hustle and that sort of attitude about having ambition and drive to do a billion things and get it all done. Right before my stroke, I had been accepted to graduate school at George Washington University with the Shakespeare Theater Academy for Classical Acting. They have a MFA, Master of Fine Arts program there, and I was one of the students. And I was studying Shakespeare and stage combat and dance and, text analysis. And it was a very intense program, but a very rewarding program. And I was extremely happy to be there. I was only there for one semester. And then after 2 days into Christmas break, after the fall semester was done, I had my stroke.
So you were really sort of living the dream at that point and just running around like crazy when all of a sudden life turns upside down.
Yeah, I really thought I was living the dream. I was doing well in my career and I loved what I did and I was engaged at the time. And, I felt really, really great about my life.
Mm-hmm. So what happened that day that everything changed?
So my stroke took a couple of days, basically. I had something called a cavernous angioma, which is shortened to cavernoma, which is a vascular malformation, a blood vessel malformation in my brainstem. And 1 in 500 people has a cavernoma, but only 30% of those cavernomas will act up in your lifetime. So you may have a cavernoma your whole life and never know it. They can be in different parts of your body. When they're in your brain, it's bad news because if they hemorrhage a little bit, they can cause problems like dizziness or seizures or vision problems. But if they hemorrhage in a big way, like mine did, you can have a stroke. So I had a hemorrhagic stroke from a cavernoma that just decided to hemorrhage one day in my brainstem, and I didn't know it was there beforehand. And it started off with a headache, very bad headache, but I just thought I was dehydrated, and I drank some water, took some ibuprofen, and felt kind of crappy the whole day. That was a Sunday morning, and then by Monday, I still felt crappy, but I thought maybe I had the flu. And I had one moment in the day where I didn't have my balance just for an instant. And I thought that was very strange. But because it was there and gone in a moment, I didn't really know what to think about it. And then I just thought if I sleep enough tonight, I'll feel better. That's what I had done in the past when I felt crappy. And I went to bed at 9:00 on Monday night, and I woke up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. And then I had another instant where I didn't have my balance, and I was scared. And I thought, if this happens again tomorrow, I need to, go to a doctor. And I got up the next morning and I didn't feel any better. My speech had started to slur. And that was because my lips on the right side of my face were no longer moving. The right corner of my mouth was not moving at all. And so my speech sounded strange. I had made my living as an actor and a voiceover artist. And so I was very aware of how I sounded. And it was very strange. I couldn't make my lips behave the way I wanted to. So I get up on Tuesday morning and I still don't feel good, and I lose my balance for an instant the third time, and I decide, okay, I've got to go to the hospital. And I call up my insurance and they give me the name of a doctor I can go and see. And I call up the doctor and they say, we can see you in 2 months. And I say, well, I think I need to see someone today. And they said, okay, go to the ER. So this is like 11 a.m. I walk to the ER that was near my apartment at GW Hospital.
And great call on not driving yourself.
Oh yeah. I was thankfully super close, and it was 2.5 blocks, but on my way there, I feel like I've started limping for some reason, and I can't figure out why I'm limping. And I'm so glad in retrospect that I didn't fall down in the middle of the street on my way there. But I go there and I check myself into the ER, and I'm 33 years old. I'm in the best shape of my life at this point in time. because I've been doing Pilates 3 times a week. I don't smoke. I don't drink in excess. It's like, what the heck is going on with me? I did not think I was having a stroke. Nobody at the hospital thought I was having a stroke. It took 6 hours for me to get a CAT scan. In the meantime, they're giving me a pregnancy test and stuff like that. And then I get a CAT scan and they say, you have some bleeding in your brainstem. But they still don't say the word stroke, right? And they say we need to observe you overnight. And so they keep me in the hospital overnight, but they say, don't worry, we're not going to put a bunch of tubes in you. I'm just in the ICU on a gurney, and they come and they do a neuro check on me every 4 hours or 2 hours, and they shine the light in your eyes and they ask you those questions like, who's the president? And, but it's still not life threatening. And the next day they're like, well, maybe we're going to transfer you to a rehab hospital. But by that time, my arm is not working the way it should. It's totally uncoordinated. And this is now Wednesday, and between Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, things just get precipitously worse. And I become completely paralyzed on the left side of my body and the right side of my face. Because the stroke is in my brainstem, all of the signals cross over in your brainstem. So it's the right side of my face, but the left side of my body. My eyes become totally desynchronized. So I've got crazy double vision. I lose the ability to speak. I lose my swallowing reflex. So they have to put a ventilator in. And by Thursday morning, which was Christmas morning, I'm on a ventilator. I'm totally paralyzed. I can't move. I can't speak. And they're saying we need to do emergency brain surgery on you. And I'm still cognitively there. I can understand what people are saying to me, and I'm communicating by squeezing my hand. I have like a pointer finger is yes, or no, thumbs up is yes, pointer finger is no. And then to spell out a word, the person will hold my right hand, which I can still use, and they'll spell the alphabet, and I will squeeze on the letter to spell out words. And it's so terrifying, and it's so frustrating and like maddeningly slow to say anything to anyone. And my sister flew in from Colorado. I'm in DC at this time, and my fiance's father came in, and they keep watch over me in the hospital, and they don't let anything happen to me. They don't let me go to surgery without understanding exactly what we need to have happen. And I end up getting transferred to Johns Hopkins, which is an amazing hospital. They're number 3 in the country for neurosurgery, and I'm so glad that I was there. And they do a surgery on me, a brainstem surgery, which is very risky, very complicated. But my surgeon was extremely talented, and she got this vascular malformation out of my brain and sewed me back up, and I had this giant scar, and I had brain surgery, which is, I got to tell you, it's having a stroke is a game changer. Having brain surgery after that is pretty game changer too.
Right. You don't even get the chance to learn the rules of one game when you got to play another.
Right. But like basically I had to have the surgery. There was
Sure.
no potential recovery without the surgery.
Right.
I was on a ventilator. I was immobile. I was going to die eventually.
Because all of the fundamental functions of human biology, all the most basic stuff, breathing, heartbeat, everything, is all through the brainstem.
Exactly. Like if you have a hemorrhage the size of a grapefruit somewhere in your brain, you can probably survive. But if you have a hemorrhage the size of a pea in your brainstem, you may die. And it's all of those things. It's respiration, it's body temperature, it's heart rate, it's every single lizard brain function, of your basic ability to live as an organism is in your brainstem. And that's where my hemorrhage was. So getting it out was the only path to me ever, living beyond that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's really interesting, to me at least, is that when we talk about, the blood of the human body, it's so important to everything that we do. It brings nutrients and oxygen to our brain cells and takes away the garbage from them. But at the same time, it can't actually touch those brain cells. And if that blood touches those brain cells start dying and really bad things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more I've learned about stroke and how so many people have ischemic strokes, and mine was hemorrhagic, and, with an ischemic stroke, maybe you get this drug that can help you bounce back so quickly, and thinking, well, there was no solution like that for me. It had to be brain surgery. And that is the last resort. You may get damage from the surgery. You may have damage already extensively from the hemorrhage. And it's can't get any worse. So we're going to go in there.
You said there are a couple of other really interesting things you mentioned in there. First, a couple of things that really come to mind. One of the things we see in your story especially is the importance of the evolving fast messaging around stroke awareness. Normally we talk about fast awareness. It's, look at face, look at arms, look at speech. And if those things are compromised, time to call 911. But now we're seeing more talk about be fast to integrate balance and vision as well, because it sounds like you didn't present with any of the traditional symptoms at the beginning of this process. It was the balance and the headache.
Yeah. My first symptoms beyond the headache were balance and vision and a little bit of speech, but not speech as in aphasia, speech as in my lips aren't moving, and so I have a no enunciation. I had this initial hemorrhage, and then I had another hemorrhage that made everything so much worse 2 days later. And they said, if you wait at all, you could have a third hemorrhage, and a third one will definitely kill you.
Right. So as you went through the surgeries and began going through, get through that initial phase and start moving into the recovery phase, I mean, what was your hospital and rehab experience like?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say I was totally clueless about anything healthcare related, because I had been so blessed with such a great body and a sound body. And I hadn't even spent one day in a hospital up until this point. I didn't know what the difference between inpatient and outpatient was. And after the brain surgery was success, they take out the ventilator. I can breathe on my own, which is an enormous success. And they, I'm still at Hopkins for another 10 days beyond that. And then they say, okay, well, you're going to go to a rehab hospital. And I think to myself, but I'm not a drug addict. What? I didn't even know what a rehab hospital was,
It's interesting. When we talk about going to rehab these days, it's, always have to go ahead and clarify what that rehab is for.
Right. But I went to a great rehab place in DC called National Rehab Hospital, and I was there for 5 weeks, and I did PT, OT, and speech every day, and they were awesome. And then I got to go home, which was it was shocking to me that I was allowed to go home being this incapacitated, but now in retrospect, I realize, it was the time for me to leave the hospital, but I really thought that they would fix me at the rehab hospital and I would be leaving the hospital as healthy as I was, a month ago.
Yeah. And it's really just the start of the next phase.
Right.
So how has your recovery been since then? What sorts of challenges are you still dealing with, the things that they weren't able to fix in your inpatient days?
Well, it's been over 3.5 years now, and I definitely worked my ass off in my recovery. For the first 2 years, I was in the gym 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day sometimes, and picking up kidney beans with my affected hand and putting them in a jar and just doing all of these recovery exercises as much as I could, thinking I'm going to get back to where I was, and realizing over the course of time that that is not the case. And, that's demoralizing, I must say, to put so much effort into getting better and realizing you can't just decide that you're going to be part of the 10% of stroke survivors that make a full recovery. That was hard for me to grasp. But now I still work on my recovery every day. I walk on the treadmill. I do some weight training. I do some stretching and some yoga. I have a recumbent tricycle that I ride around on that is super fun. And I've tried doing a lot of adaptive sports because I used to be a pretty serious athlete. So I've tried adaptive rowing, adaptive kayaking. I've done some snorkeling, which is fun.
Wow.
And I want to keep trying stuff like that. I think it's good to challenge yourself. And I try and move my affected hand around. Unfortunately, I don't have any proprioception on the left side of my body, so I can't tell where my arm or my hand is if I'm not looking at it. And another challenge that I deal with is I have some very intense nerve pain from my stroke. So I have these sensations of burning, freezing, squeezing, crushing. It's sort of a variation of all of those put together. And everything is super heavy too, because my brain doesn't know that my limbs are there, so they can only feel the weight of my limbs. And, I feel like everything's dragging down on me all the time. And I have a lot of vision problems, and some of my vision problems have actually gotten worse since my stroke. I had eye realignment surgery to make my eyeballs be situated in the center of my eye socket again. And that has helped for sure, but I still have double vision in a lot of parts of my vision. And I have something called hypertrophic olivary degeneration, which is a involuntary bouncing of my eye, sort of bouncing up and down. It's kind of like my whole life is on a shaky camcorder, and I definitely cannot drive.
If you've imagined watching a shaky camcorder for 30 seconds and then try to imagine living with that.
Exactly. You don't want to look anymore, but
Right.
I have to look to get through my day. So, but yeah, I can't drive. I didn't work for 14 months. The pain that I deal with is very hard to treat, and I've tried a lot of medications and some sort of alternative therapies, and nothing's worked so far, which is frustrating. And I've started creating these Barbie art projects to sort of describe what my body feels like, because outwardly you can't tell that there's a whole lot of pain in my body because it looks like a normal body.
Well, that's one of those things that's really interesting too. When we talk about all of these things that are going on with limbs and things like that, ultimately, with stroke, there's nothing wrong with our arms. There's nothing wrong with our legs. The problem is literally all in our head.
Yes.
And it's a data problem.
I mean, it still boggles my mind. I am still so confused about it because I look at my arm, I look at my left arm, which is the affected one, and I look at my right one, and they look exactly the same.
Right.
But one of them just doesn't behave at all how I want it to.
Right. And dealing with the pain, so is it a constant pain, or is it one of those things that comes in waves or comes and goes?
It is chronic, so it's there all the time, which is hard to deal with. But, I guess I'm better able to deal with it now because it's been years of it being there. And initially, you're like, oh, I've been in pain for 2 weeks, or, oh, I've been in pain for 7 months, or, oh, I've been in pain for a year, but then it becomes 2 years, and then it becomes 3 years, and then maybe it'll be 10 years at some point. And, it's there all the time, but things do make it worse. If I don't get enough sleep, it gets worse. If I'm in very cold weather, it gets worse. If I am really overexerting myself, like exercising too much, it can get worse. And there's a very strange emotional component to it that I think has to do with adrenaline, so that if I'm excited, it gets worse. But also if I'm angry, or if I'm I got back on stage for the first time recently, and the adrenaline of going back on stage made my pain worse. And I spent a lot of time meditating backstage to try and calm it back down again. But yeah, it's very strange. I don't understand it. And no doctor has been able to really effectively tell me why it's like this. But, this is my experience with learning so much about the brain, because I had to, is that people do not know what is going on in the brain or why. It's so misunderstood. And in terms of other organs in the body, we know a heck of a lot more about the pancreas than we do about the brain.
Right.
And, yeah.
And when you start talking about chronic pain, and that all gets even more complicated these days with all of the political discussions happening around chronic pain and the opioid crisis that's going on in the country.
Exactly. And I think that people don't have much empathy for people with chronic pain. I don't think you can really understand chronic pain until you have chronic pain. My analogy that I like to say is living with chronic pain, or trying to tell someone about what it's like to have chronic pain, is like trying to explain to someone what it's like to tread water in the ocean versus being in a bathtub. So you may have had pain on a day, and that's you in a bathtub. And I have chronic pain all day, and that's me in the ocean. And yes, we're both in water, but your experience is way different than my experience. I also feel like the opioid crisis is a huge problem, but there are people with chronic pain who need opioids to survive. Like, it does help their pain and it helps them function. And the idea that we will just cut off access to all the opioids as a solution is completely absurd, because some people need them and some people get use out of them and they live better, more high quality lives because of opioids. And so I wish that people would understand that a little more and have a little more compassion for people who are legally taking opioids because they've been prescribed them, and they're not all drug addicts. Like,
right.
That is a complete misconception.
You mentioned returning to the stage recently, and you're back to acting now and playing big roles like Puck in Shakespeare's work. And how has your stroke changed your acting?
Well, I would say I'm back to acting, but in a very small way. There's a theater company in Denver where I live now that only casts actors with disabilities. It's called Family, spelled Phamally. And they're really phenomenal organization. And you have to have a disability that qualifies under the ADA in order to audition for them. And so I felt like I could audition for them and they would understand what I can and can't do and understand me as an actor way more easily than any other theater company might. And that has been absolutely true. I think my experiences with them have been really magical, really meaningful. I got to be in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was a very small production, but I did play Puck, which was a wonderful role. And then I got to be in the musical Into the Woods this summer, and I played Cinderella's stepmother. And in both situations, the company is so accommodating of everyone, of anything you need with your disability. If you have dyslexia or you're deaf or you use a wheelchair or anything, and they're super understanding and compassionate. And I think I've been really lucky to work with them. And it's been, a little heartbreaking, a little hard to be on stage again in this body because I feel so frustrated with this body that I'm in. But I'm really glad that my mind is still there and I can still examine a character and examine text and understand what my intentions are and explore those things. So I think that having a disability has opened up a side of my acting that I didn't know was there, and I may have never had access to under different circumstances. I feel like I'm a more open actor than I used to be.
Interesting. That is, that's really, I want to say that's really cool, but of course, nobody really wants to have to get to that stuff this way.
Exactly.
But being able to access that other stuff is fascinating. I think it's really great that theater is there and casting more folks with disabilities. And we're going to have links to all of that over at strokecast.com/Maggie. So folks can certainly go ahead and check that out and explore that a little bit further. They're a great company. They've been in Denver for 30 years now, and they do a musical every summer, and then they'll do some other smaller programming. While this Strokecast is going up, they'll be doing the play Harvey in Denver, which is just a regular play. It's not a musical, but it's a good show, and I'm definitely going to go check it out. It's a great show featuring a 6 foot tall invisible rabbit.
Yes.
That's really cool. It's also really nice to start seeing more actors with disabilities or more characters with disabilities showing up in more mainstream media. If only there were more actors with disabilities playing those characters.
I wholeheartly agree with you. And I have started to look into this because, I'm an actor now. I was an actor, and now I'm an actor with a disability. And let me tell you, the numbers are terrible. 95% of disabled characters are played by able-bodied actors. And, you think of any disabled character that some actor won an Academy Award for, and they're all able-bodied actors. And I find it kind of insulting. And I wish that there were more disabled actors out there playing disabled roles.
But of course, the limitations on what casting directors are doing aren't stopping you from going ahead and creating your own projects. So I mentioned in the intro, you're talking about this film project you're working on, The Great Now What? And so can you tell us a little bit about that and why you wanted to create it?
I had done some filmmaking before I had a stroke, and I'd done a little bit of producing, a little bit of acting, and I watched a documentary that my OT had recommended to me called The Crash Reel, spelled R-E-E-L. And it is about a snowboarder named Kevin Pierce who was really exceptional, and everybody thought that he was going to go and beat Shaun White in the Olympics in 2010. And Shaun White is the guy who wins all the gold medals, right?
Right, the flying tomato.
Right, exactly. And Kevin Pierce falls in the half pipe 7 weeks before the Vancouver Olympics, and he has a massive TBI. And of course, he can't be a professional snowboarder anymore. And this documentary about him really resonated with me. And it's about him and his recovery and how he deals with his life, having had this, trajectory and all these things going for him, and this supposed goal of these things and this amazing talent that he had, and all of it changes in an instant. And the film is also about extreme sports and how we watch these athletes doing these extreme sports and they're getting really hurt, and who is going to take care of them? Who's going to insure them? The sponsors don't necessarily do it. So
right.
It has a social impact message as well. But Kevin Pierce's story really resonated with me because I felt a lot of kinship with him in having a lot of potential and a lot of, just on the brink of success energy, and then it all changes and I have to drop out of school. I lose my relationship, and I thought I was going to marry this person and have a family, and my career is, in my mind, basically over, and I have this body that plagues me now, and my vision is totally changed. And I thought about my experience, and I thought about how do I get this across to another person? Well, I could write a book. I could create some sort of one-woman live theater piece, because I have this pretty extensive theater background. But I thought a film is what I want to do, because a film will be more accessible to people with disabilities and stroke survivors. A film will be able to better convey what my vision is like now and challenges with that. And so I was just really inspired by the crash reel, and I decided, okay, I want to make a film. I want to make a documentary about this whole thing, and it's going to be amazing.
It's so fantastic that there are resources to go ahead and make that happen now. And just last week, you launched the crowdfunding effort to help make the rest of this film a reality. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the crowdfunding campaign was launched on October 29th, which is World Stroke Day. And I figured that was a great way to kick us off. And we have some great incentives on the website. Like if you support the film for a certain amount of money, then you get an incentive that could be digital. It could be a hard copy thing, like a gift card to a restaurant or something like that. And we really want to generate a bunch of enthusiasm and interest in the film, because knowing that there are 7 million stroke survivors in the United States and 80 million people with disabilities, the audience is out there. We just got to let them know about this film, and I think they'll be excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll have all those links over at strokecast.com/Maggie. But one of the things I really love about the trailer and about what I've seen from the film so far is the title, The Great Now What? I just love that, because I think, from my perspective, it really is about, pretty much every day for me is about a now what? Here I am. Here's where we are today. What do I want to do with that? How did you pick the title, and what does that mean to you?
I'm very lucky to work with this woman named Lisa Donato, who's the director and the producer with me. And we had been brainstorming for probably a year about what do we call this thing. And I read a book recently called Fates and Furies. And it's an incredible book by Lauren Groff. And there's a point in the story where the woman who's one of the two protagonists is at a point in her life where something really devastating has happened. And, what happens next, we don't know. And she's only in her, I think, mid-40s. And there's so much beyond where she is right now. But you don't know what it is. And I read that book, and then like 4 months later, this little phrase, the great now what, popped into my head as one of the ideas for the title of the film. We had, maybe 100 options on this list, and it just popped into my head. And I thought, okay, that one. And then a couple months after that, I thought, where did I even find this phrase? And then I Googled it, and it was from that book that I like so much. And I think it conveys something, that has a lot of anticipation to it. Like, what happens now? I don't know. And Lisa and I joke sometimes because she calls it the great now what? And I call it the great now what? Because I feel frustrated a lot of the time in my recovery, and I wish I could be a place that I'm not. And, but it is all about what happens next and how you get to tomorrow or next year or 2050. And, the whole trajectory of my life has changed. I don't have the career I thought I would. I don't have the relationship I thought I would. I don't have the family I thought I would. I don't have the schooling I thought I would. But somehow I didn't die. So I have to go now beyond where I am. And I guess the whole film is an investigation of that.
So it sounds like Lisa has been a fantastic resource to work with. How did you connect with her and the other folks that you are working on the project with?
Well, she has been just phenomenal. And I connected with her through a mutual friend in Denver, because after I decided I wanted to make a film, I decided I cannot direct this film because I don't really know how to make a film. I just have all these ideas. And also, my vision is very compromised, and film is such a visual medium. You gotta have good eyes to work on a film. So I put a bunch of feelers out there to my community, and being an actor, I knew a lot of theater directors and a lot of film people. And I got a bunch of recommendations, and I met with people one-on-one and talked with them about this idea. And she and I met, and I had such a great impression of her right from the beginning. She's very empathetic. She's really passionate about what she does. She's passionate about telling stories of people who are often invisible, like people with disabilities, people who are LGBTQ, people who are ethnic minorities. And I watched this film she had done about a man in Pakistan who was advocating for free speech. And it was just a short documentary, but I thought, wow, did she pack an amazing punch in 8 minutes. and I thought, I definitely want to work with her if she wants to work with me. And now we've been working together for a while.
Awesome. It's amazing. One of the things you talk about there is often the solution to a lot of things when we whether we're talking about something career-wise or passion project-wise, it's, put it out there. Let people know what you're looking for. Reach out to other folks. And because the other folks around you, even if you didn't know her in advance, people who did know her, and you go out and you talk to people and you put it out there and you let them know what you're looking for. And that's how so many connections happen. It's about putting that out there in the universe and letting those relationships let it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just ask. Have the guts to ask, and maybe something will come to you. But if you never ask, you're never going to know.
Exactly. And that's just like in therapy, where if you don't try it, you'll never know if you can do it.
Right.
So what do you want more stroke survivors and caregivers to know, especially early in the process?
I want stroke survivors and caregivers to gain a little more understanding and compassion for each other. If a stroke survivor is dealing with a caregiver, but that caregiver has never had a stroke, then, as empathetic as that person can be, they can't really understand what that person is going through. And so the goal of the film is to build understanding and build compassion for caregivers, for stroke survivors, for the whole of society. Beyond that, I would say that having the stroke is not the end point of your life. There is something beyond it, because you are a survivor. You're not gone because of the stroke. The stroke victims, in my opinion, are the ones who aren't here anymore, but the stroke survivors are the people who are here. And you have had a stroke, and it'll be a day after your stroke, and then a month after your stroke, and then a year after your stroke, and then 20 years after your stroke. And it's not the end point where everything good in your life disappears, although it really can feel that way for a while, and it really felt that way for me.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
I basically only have the use of one hand, and I've arranged my purse so that it's really helpful to me. I took my keys and I put my keys on a carabiner that I clip to the strap on my purse, and my purse has a long strap so it can go around my shoulder and across my body. So I have my purse sort of always on my hip, and I can grab my keys off the strap really easily. And then there's a little spot where I can put my phone, so I can grab my phone out with one hand, and it's got a flap on it. And the flap has a really handy little clear window on the inside where you can put a card. And so I put my RTD Accessoride card in that little window.
And RTD is what?
So, each city is going to have their own sort of ADA compliant transportation mechanism for people with disabilities. And in Denver, it's called Access-a-Ride. And RTD is the Regional Transportation District in Denver.
Gotcha.
So I have this little card, and that allows me to book accessible travel door to door in a handicapped accessible van with a wheelchair lift if I need it. And that card also allows me to take the light rail and take the bus. So now if I need to show that card, I just flip up the flap on my purse and show them the card, and I don't have to pull it out of anything. So my purse is like really easily accessible for one hand, which is nice. And I also got a purse that's exactly the right length for me to leave my handicapped parking placard in there, because I can't drive anymore, but I'm often a passenger in other people's cars. And of course, they love getting the handicapped parking spot with me. So,
absolutely. You'll have people begging to take you to Costco.
Right. So I just keep that placard in my purse. I always have it with me.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining us this week. This has been fantastic, and I want to encourage everybody to go ahead and check out the links to the Great Now What, which we'll have over at strokecast.com/Maggie, and you'll find the link to the crowdfunding program. And absolutely, please go ahead and check that out. And if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
Well, I'm definitely really focused on the film right now. So if you wanted to check out the film website, it's thegreatnowwhat.com. I also manage the Facebook page for the film, which is facebook.com/thegreatnowwhat. And you can like the page or follow the page. And I like to put something on the page every day. Sometimes it's an inspiring quote. Sometimes it's a news story about actors with disabilities. Sometimes it's a fact about stroke. Or it might be an episode of Strokecast with Bill Monroe. But I put something on there every day that's related to stroke, to disability, to the film itself, to the artwork that I'm creating around the film. So check it out. I think it's a good Facebook page with a lot of interesting stuff on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Maggie does a great job telling her story. I can really feel the emotions in it, and it's just really, I find it really compelling to listen to it on playback. I really look forward to seeing what she accomplishes with The Great Now What. The crowdfunding campaign started on October 29th. As I get ready to post this episode, it's now the evening of November 1st, 2018, just a couple of days later. Maggie has already raised nearly $20,000 of the minimum $41,000 goal required to finish the film. If they pass that goal, there's all sorts of awesome things the team can accomplish to make it an even better movie. So be sure to check it out. To do that, check out the film at thegreatnowwhat.com. You can also find the crowdfunding campaign there if you would like to support the film. To find that page and all the other links in today's episode, you can also visit strokecast.com/Maggie. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, colleague, relative, theater person, or independent film buff. Just tell them to visit strokecast.com/Maggie. Be sure to organize your purse or laptop bag or backpack for one-handed access. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network. you.